Welcome back to Jibreel Talks Comics, my show where I go over my pull list, what I read that week, and give you guys some recommendations for next week. Hope you guys are doing well. I'm excited to record this episode. I'm on vacation right now, so we have a very lax vibe right now. Chill, crack open a coffee or a beer or whatever you drink, sit back, maybe pull something up, surf Instagram, do something. We're going to be chilling for a bit today. I read very little in terms of digital reads this week, but we have quite a bit of recommendations for next week, so we should make some pretty good time. Before I get started, let's get to the drink. We have another iced Nespresso pod coffee this week, also with oat milk, a little bit of vanilla, just 2 pumps of vanilla Monin syrup just to keep the gears moving and stuff like that. I was going to go a little bit higher end, local brewery. I was going to go for something a little darker roasted, maybe a little whiskey bourbon combo, but I was short on time, had to get the Nespresso pod. So we needed something quickly, so I'm very excited. Not bad. It's darker than I normally go with the Nespresso pods. I think it's like a Espresso Chiaro or something like that, Obscuro, something like that. It's like an Italian word or something like that. It's fine. Let's get into the pull list. We have 9 books this week. I got shorted 1 book from my LCS. That's still coming. So as a heads up for you guys, I have an art germ variant of Catwoman. What is it? Uncovered or something like that. It's another photo book very similar to what was just done for Poison Ivy. I told you guys in the recommendation list of something to keep an eye out for if you're into art, if you like the covers and variants for Catwoman. That book is coming out, and I did order it because of the art germ variant. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have got it. I'm trying to cut down the amount of single issues that I get, and so that was definitely one that I otherwise wouldn't have gotten if it wasn't for the variant, but here we are. Let's start out with some heat. We're going to go Marvel, DC, and then a little bit of indie at the end there. First one, we have Ultimate Invasion number 3. Got a lot of thoughts about this issue. So to start off, if you haven't read this, big spoilers if you're not keeping up with Ultimate Invasion and all the Hickman-verse stuff, you're not going to be able to follow what I'm talking about here, and this is going to be some major spoilers, so heads up on that. Skip this section entirely if you haven't read all that. But this was, I think, a good issue. It's by far not the greatest so far. It's a more low-key issue, but I think it's a very necessary issue. It's a lot slower. It's more dialogue-heavy. There's no real action. There is a lot of world building here, and what this kind of focuses on is establishing who the power players are in this kind of reanimated or recreated Ultimate Universe by the maker. And you have Howard Stark being introduced to all of this, in some ways being scouted into this group, this kind of like newfangled Illuminati type group is what it's kind of going for here. And he kind of gets to see all the major players, and it's a lot of your typical Marvel players. You got a Hulk there. Magic is surprisingly there. I saw Omega Red there. There was a number. DaCosta was there too. So there was a lot of interesting. It was just a very eclectic mix of characters that kind of came together. And these are people that the maker is working with to control this new universe. And through the dialogue sequences that you get in this book, you get an understanding that they are obviously manipulating the way that their respective regions work, and you get a whole map out, a very Hickman-like diagram of the entire world and how it's kind of divided up. And so you can see all the major sections of the world are kind of divided by region and represented in that room, and they're all kind of working in conjunction with one another to control this world from the top down. Very interesting stuff. Again, I think it's very important. What Hickman is obviously doing with this is he spent the first issue and a half or so explaining how a new Ultimate Universe could come back into creation. Obviously, everything that happened in Secret Wars kind of left it in limbo. We did know that some form of the Ultimate Universe existed after that, and that's because we saw like little echoes of that. But obviously it's a dead universe. If you read Miles Morales, and you have like Ultimatum, for example, who's kind of universe jumping, and they kind of allude to that. So in Marvel, they've alluded to the fact that the Ultimate Universe has kind of ceased existence for the most part in terms of like relevant storylines going on there after Secret Wars. But this is kind of being restored by the maker. He's making his own universe, but it's a universe in his own creation. So Hickman spent a little bit of time doing that. Then from that point onwards, you have an understanding of what the kind of resistance to him looks like. And then from there, now in this universe, he's fully embedded in it. What does this universe look like? and who is controlling it, and that's what they're answering. And I think this is all branching out to what will inevitably be the Ultimate Universe's dedicated series. They'll probably I don't know if there's going to be an Ultimate Spider-Man or Ultimate Fantastic Four or X-Men or anything like that the way it looked in the early 2000s, but this is very obviously him laying down the full groundwork to fully understand in a comprehensive view of what this new universe is going to look like. And so far I'm very intrigued by it. There's nothing about this new restored Ultimate Universe that I think mandates from me that I need to see more of this necessarily, because it's different, yes, but like it's not so fundamentally different. You know, when you started reading Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate X-Men, Fantastic Four, and the Ultimates, they kind of laid the groundwork to a very, very different universe in the 616 at that point, and you wanted to see the way things played out, the alternate origins, the alternate aesthetic looks at things, you know, they're encountering characters differently. This time, since we did all that, I would imagine the restored Ultimate Universe is going to be even more different than that, and we've seen some things, but as of right now, I think I need to see a little bit more to be fully bought in. The reason why I'm invested right now is because I trust Hickman. You know, I've read his new Avengers stuff, his Fantastic Four, X-Men, all of that. Even his late Ultimate Universe stuff, I've read some of that. And so I trust him in this world. But at the same time, I'm still trying to fully understand what they're exactly going for here. Like, is this leading to a fundamental, like, the Ultimate Universe is back. It's a different Ultimate Universe than before, but the Ultimate Universe is back. We're going to have a number of series that kind of tie into one another. It's going to be this nice fresh start again. Is it going to be that? Because the problem is, what made the original Ultimate Universe, I think, so appealing at first was the fact that it was that fresh start. It didn't have years and years of lore. And by the end of it, we're talking about 2015-ish. You had 15 years worth of just built-up storylines. And it did get convoluted again. You know, by the end of the Ultimate Universe, besides some narrative decisions they made kind of like with Ultimatum and stuff like that, you ended up in a situation where the accessibility of the Ultimate Universe was gone. And so with this restored universe, unfortunately, that doesn't seem to rectify the issues of the late Ultimate Universe, because of Hickman he can be convoluted at times. You know, I love Hickman's work, but because he brings in so many different branches, it makes, he's not an accessible writer. He never has been. I think you can jump into like Krakoa era X-Men or his run on Fantastic Four and get a rough idea, but he pulls from a lot of different threads. And so this Ultimate Universe, I think, to fully understand where things are being kind of reborn, unless something dramatically changes in that fourth issue, it's going to be birthing a universe with a ton of weight behind it to fully understand who the hell the Maker is and how things play in, what the role Miles Morales, if any, plays into that as the survivor of that kind of destroyed Ultimate Universe. What is Secret Wars? Like, whatever, all these things. To understand that, you need to, so it's not that same fresh start. You know, let's say if there's a restored Ultimate Spider-Man, which, judging by the way he kind of intervened with Peter's origin in Ultimate Invasion #1, it doesn't seem like they're going that direction. But let's say they do a new Ultimate Spider-Man #1, and this is like the second iteration of that. Do you need to know who the Maker is? Is it really like this fresh start where, like in the original Ultimate Spider-Man, there was nothing that came before it? You start on issue 1, this is the first thing. More similar to like a manga, for example. I wonder, so, you know, like, I wonder if this series is really serving as the birth of a new universe, or is this the transition into the rebirthed Ultimate Universe, which maybe we haven't seen yet. You know what I mean? Like, maybe this is them kind of tying up the loose ends of the previous stuff, dealing with the Maker and him trying to do his thing. There'll be maybe a face-off in issue 4 or something like that. He'll get wiped out, but that universe remains, and then they start moving forward. So they kind of tie up all the old loose ends, get rid of the Maker, get rid of his little Illuminati group that he created, and then kind of go from there. Maybe. It's an idea. But overall, again, what Hickman is great for is getting you thinking, getting those wheels turning, and then just making very intriguing work, even if you don't love all the decisions he makes. But yeah, overall, very good issue. Next up, Miss Marvel, the New Mutant, and we have an art germ variant here. Not my favorite art germ variant. It's a lot less like pretty than some of the others. But overall, this is Iman Vellani partially written. She didn't do all the writing on it. But overall, I would say that I enjoyed this. And really quick, I wanted to pull up the other writer's name, because I definitely wanted to give Sabir Pirzada. It seems to be his name. So shout out to them. Overall, I thought this was a really, really fun book. So the rough idea is this is kind of spawning out of everything that happened with the Hellfire Gala and Amazing Spider-Man, where, spoiler alert, Kamala dies. She's since been reanimated. It's also spawning a little bit out of X-Men because, you know, she's working in the underground stuff with Kitty and all of them and Rasputin. And so this is a situation where Kamala is in a unique position where she is now a full mutant. She's still an Inhuman, but she is a full mutant. She is also an X-Men, but she doesn't have a detectable X gene yet because her mutant powers haven't fully manifested, or not even fully, haven't manifested whatsoever. So she's still able to freely kind of navigate this kind of Orcus-dominated world, which I think is very interesting. And so she is basically on a mission to infiltrate Orcus, or an Orcus-related event or program, because she is the only one freely able to do so. And so I think there's a fun half X-Men, half Miss Marvel series. That was one of my main concerns going in, having really liked some of the Miss Marvel material that has been published. Loved her in Champions as well. Where now that she's in the X world, like, is she just going to get absorbed like the rest of the X-Men and the mutants get their times to shine? But again, it's a lot of different players in the X universe. Or will she properly like get her time to shine in her own series that feels like a Miss Marvel series? And I have to say, concretely, this does still feel like a Miss Marvel series, thankfully. It's fun, it's quirky, it deals with a lot of heavy things, you know, the fact that, yeah, she like literally died and she confides in her friend about that, but she is in a very challenging position, and she's trying to, in some ways, show that, like, use her privilege almost as, like, a free walking mutant to show that, like, they can still help people and they're not to be feared, but kind of quickly realizing that, like, anti-mutant sentiment is at a seemingly irreparable bad, like, level, and that no action she takes can rectify that because she's not viewed the same way she does. She has this, like, full X-Men suit, and even when she's trying to help, it's like interpreted by a lot of people as kind of an attack because, again, a lot of people have been brainwashed by Orcus in some ways with all the misinformation surrounding and it's not even necessarily misinformation because the mutant medicine was tainted by, you know, MODOK and Dr. Stasis and them, and then you have the misinformation that is misinformation about the Hellfire Gala. And so with that whole combination of things, she's in a position where she can't fix that. She can't fix public sentiment. It's kind of beyond her. And so it's like, what does she do? She wants to help people. Like, she's always helped people, but now she's particularly vulnerable. So I think this is a really, really fun book. I'm liking it. You get some interesting people set up, some interesting antagonists. Again, everything's coming out of Orcus, like the rest of the X-Office books right now, is Orcus is that main antagonist for the mutants right now. So kind of even when they establish new antagonists on a series by series basis, they're all kind of spawning out of Orcus. They're kind of like Orcus subsects that are kind of dedicated. Same thing, this actually reminded me in some ways of the Astonishing Iceman series that kind of just debuted. So overall, really fun book. And if you're reading X-Men and you want some more supplementary material, I think this book kind of serves well as that. Only downside is that I think it's only going to be like 4 issues or something like that, which is insane. I wish they gave them more. Next one, quick one, we have Marvel Age number 1000. This is a compilation book, so it has a series of short books, and overall I really, really enjoyed it. I wanted to give a shout out to a couple shorts in particular. Specifically, I'm thinking the Spider-Man one was really, really fun. I loved the X-Men one. You know, I'm like an X super fan. And the art on that was just gorgeous. Actually, and maybe this is the same artist, but it reminds me a lot of the Power Girl from the DC side backup stories. So yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to that. But yeah, no, this is a pretty fun book, and it's just a celebration of Marvel's history. You get Captain Marvel in there, and I think Fantastic Four make an appearance or something like that. And so you get like all the different corners of the Marvel universe kind of represented in here by a lot of all-star writers. We've seen books like this, you know, the various celebration issues. They did it for all different types of characters. This is in that vein, but I think it's a fun read overall. How much was this? I think this was a $10 book. Yeah, I don't have the price on this, but yeah, it was a $10 book. Overall build quality and the amount of the stories, I think it is a good purchase to have, but not must-read material. There's not too much happening in this book that's setting up future stuff or anything like that, so I wouldn't say that, like, if you're a comprehensive reader and you don't want to miss anything, you're not missing anything by not getting this book. But if you're a Marvel fan, I recommend it. Quick facsimile, we have giant size X-Men You know I'm a sucker for the facsimiles. I pretty much keep the facsimiles to like Wonder Woman, Spider-Man, and X-Men. And this book I technically have in a different form. So obviously I don't have the original Giant Size X-Men. I wish I did. But I have the classic X-Men from the 90s reprint of Giant Size X-Men 1. And I think it is just classic X-Men 1. And so I have this physically in a form, but overall it was a really fun thing to read again. I've read this story a million times at this point, but this is the beginning of what became the most iconic era of X-Men ever, you know, when Claremont took over. And so it's just always fun to revisit kind of how important this story was. But I don't have to sell you guys on Giant Size X-Men. I'm pretty sure you all know how important that was. One more Marvel book, we have Moon Knight Annual 1, and unfortunately for me, I did not pay attention, and I completely forgot that a lot of the Marvel annuals, or maybe all of the Marvel annuals right now, are Contest of Chaos tie-ins. And so I opened up this book, and I was like, oh no, like, unfortunately, it's a tie-in. And I did want to get his name right, but basically they have Moon Knight going up against a character from, oh, here we go. It's Teguki? Yeah, Teguki. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. My Korean's are not up to snuff. But from Tiger Division, basically, and they have them kind of facing off. And it follows pretty much the exact same format that you did with the Iron Man 1 and what I imagine the Spider-Gwen 1's going to have, and Venom and all of them, where they're summoned to an area. The crystals make them want to fight. You have Agatha Harkness kind of pulling the strings towards all this. They fight each other, and I guess it's kind of interesting because you have them taking on different forms of themselves, and that's actually pretty cool through different time periods. And then in the end, Moon Knight's kind of just over it, and he's just like, go ahead, you seem like a good enough dude, you win. And then they're all kind of transported together, and you see all the winners of the respective matches kind of making this kind of hodgepodge, brainwashed Avengers of Agatha Harknesses. We'll see where it goes. Anybody who's watched this show for a couple weeks now has known that the Contest of Chaos thing is not my thing. I'm not into it at all. And maybe once it kind of comes all to fruition and I see what Agatha is trying to do, maybe it could be fun. But based on what I've seen so far, it's kind of boring to me. And I guess it's nice to see the annuals do something. You know, it's been a while. Like, they don't really use the annuals like that anymore. And I remember back in the day, I used to see kind of events leveraging the annuals from a respective line, and so that's kind of cool, but at the same time, meh, it's fine. Let's move into DC. We have Night Terrors, Night's End. This is the last Night Terrors book, so for you DC fans, Night Terrors is done after this, and I have this beautiful variant I'm really, really hyped about. It's actually going to be the cover art for this episode for the streaming version, so if you watch this show on Spotify or whatever, or listen to this show on Spotify, this is going to be the art for it, because I loved the way that this cover looked. And overall, and first I'll give my thoughts on this issue, and then I'll give you my thoughts on Night Terrors overall. So for this issue, it was cool. We basically see the final face-off between all the DC heroes versus Insomnia. You get a little bit more of Insomnia's psychology into why he's trying to do. You get some ground level of how, like, people are affected by their fears of heroes and stuff like that. And they fight against him and they beat him, and unsurprising, you know, Deadman plays a huge role in being Boston Brand plays a huge role in the defeat of Insomnia. When it's all said and done, they beat him. He's out of here, and you have Sandman sealed back away, and that was a nice little moment. And then you have a very interesting conversation between, and forgive me, it's kind of mistaken me, but I'm forgetting it, but there was a conversation towards the end there. I think it's between Wonder Woman and Batman, but it also might be Wonder Woman and Superman. So sorry that I don't remember quite. But it's a very interesting thing where, like, you know, it's like, all's well that ends well. We ended that, but there is kind of a unease that kind of has taken over the DC universe about the fact that there is this kind of general fear and disdain and concern towards, like, again, public sentiment towards the Justice League. So that is interesting. I'm curious to see if there's any implications of that. I would imagine some book, maybe when Justice League comes back, that will talk about that a little bit more or something like that. But overall, it's fine. the issue was cool. It basically ended the way you would think it ends. No major implications, I don't think. But I think we know that Wesley Dobbs is going to be back eventually. Before I move on to the next book, let's talk about Night Terrors overall. It's been a 2-month event. We've had a million tie-ins with part 1s and part 2s. You've seen me over the last couple of weeks getting a number of those issues. I've read everything, so what I didn't get physically, I read digitally for the most part. The only one that I kind of skimmed over very briefly, and I was like, I'm kind of over it, is Angel Breaker. I don't really know much about the characters, so I couldn't really get into the tie-ins at all. Because if you don't have a firm basis in the character, it's kind of like reading the Poison Ivy but not knowing much about Poison Ivy. It's like the tie-ins, when they're kind of a look into the character or their surrounding cast, if you don't know who that character is, it's hard to get into. So Night Terrors overall, I thought was a fine event. I didn't have significant issues with it. My main issue is, if anything, it's like structural and logistical. I thought it was a bit much. You know what I mean? 2 months straight, every single week, more and more issues, and not that much happened. You know, we have an Alpha and Omega issue that they didn't call themselves that, but essentially that, and then 4 issues in between. So you have like a 6-issue main series and then a million tie-ins. It just seems excessive. I feel like what happened in these main issues probably could have been done in 3 to 4 issues, not 6. So that could have been half the time. And a lot of these tie-ins, like, I love being able to have multiple writers be able to participate in the event, but there's certain people got tie-ins that I don't understand why they got tie-ins, but like other characters that were doing things in Night Terrors didn't get their own. So why, like, Aquaman didn't get a tie-in? Again, I'm not a super big Aquaman fan, but we didn't get anything from Aquaman. We didn't get anything from Green Arrow, but Punchline gets a tie-in, and nothing of consequence happens in that book that kind of ties into the other things. There are other ones that were like strange at first, you know, like the Zatanna Robot Man kind of combo was kind of weird, but I like both of those characters, so I wasn't mad at it. But yeah, they made a series of strange decisions with this that I felt like all of this could have been, you know, condensed dramatically. I think we totally could have gotten this event done in 1 month, and I don't think it would have been too congested, because I don't think we needed as many tie-ins. I don't think the core thing needed to be that big. You know, I think if you did maybe 1 core issue per week for a month, so you get 4 or 5 weeks of that, 4 or 5 issues, you can do like an intro book, and then 2 in the middle books as things are kind of, they're looking for the Nightmare Stone. We found the Nightmare Stone. This is the background about insomnia. Beat them. Like, they could have wrapped it up in that way, and then have the tie-ins here and there. I think, like, you know, Detective was super good. Action Comics had some fun things. I liked Wonder Woman's was fine. Like, there were some more important ones, but like Black Adam, I don't know, man. Like, some of these didn't seem all that necessary. And I loved what, like, Catwoman did as an Elseworlds tale, but did that need to be a Night Terrors book? Definitely not. That could have totally been like a short Elseworlds miniseries, unrelated, that DC could have totally published, and nobody would have blinked an eye. If they're just like, this is an Elseworlds tale, like, it works completely. So that didn't even need to be in Night Terrors. So the event was cool. It was bloated. It was a little predictable in terms of the way that things kind of played out. In terms of Insomnia's backstory, I was a little bit let down, but I loved the art. I loved Joshua Williams did his thing, right? And I'm not mad at it. I've never been mad at his writer. I think he's actually a pretty talented writer in terms of the quality of his output, and the speed at which he does it, I think, is really impressive. So I think DC is very smart in terms of putting him in that kind of leading position, because I think he's the perfect guy to do it. You know, he can pump out work pretty quickly and of a pretty decent quality. He's also got his mainline titles that he's doing really, really well on. So yeah, shout out to Joshua Williamson, man. Like, I like to see them get their own shot at an event. But the event didn't really light me on fire. I think if you read it as a collected edition, it might be a lot more fun, you know what I mean, than reading it week to week. Week to week, I don't know, there's just a lot of blow. And I will shoot them a little bail. At no point did DC say, hey, you have to read everything. They were actually pretty explicit that, like, it's a very pick and choose type of thing. I chose to read everything, and that's because I wanted to speak comprehensively about it and give you guys, and be able to point you guys in the direction of things that make sense, and also get a full, well-rounded view of the event, because I didn't want to render an opinion on an event that I had read, 50% of or 40% of. I don't think that's necessarily fair. So I read everything, so I can speak pretty definitively on it. Like, it's fine. Like, it's okay. And also, I feel like it's interesting to have a horror, and it's not really a horror, but it's like a nightmares related event before Halloween is an interesting decision. Like why they didn't put this from like September ending at October. So like the last week of October, Halloween, that's Night Terror's night end. Why they didn't do that, I don't know. And maybe it's because they have larger things planned for that, so that slot is taken already. But I thought that was a strange decision. But overall, I'm not mad at it, but I'm certainly not going to miss it. I think it's nice to be back to regular scheduled programming. Like by week, I don't know, 3 or 4, I think. So we're talking about last month at this point. I was starting to get over Night Terrors quite a bit. So I think it's a hard thing to basically offer lots of things to lots of people and also not overstay your welcome. So I'm trying to be fair to them, but it was an uphill battle they were fighting. So quick coffee break. Delectable. Let's move into another one. We have another event that's coming. It's Batman Catwoman The Gotham War, and this is Battle Line. So this is effectively kind of like the prelude, setting the stage for everything for this Batman Catwoman event. And overall, I have to say I was very impressed by this book. This was something that I didn't have high expectations for. I'm reading both Batman and Catwoman right now, so I like Chip Zdarsky. I'm digging what Tini Howard is doing overall in Catwoman. It's not my favorite Catwoman recent run. That one probably goes to Joelle Jones. Ron V is cool. Tini Howard's probably the least favorite of like my newer Catwoman runs, but overall I still think she's very much doing her thing. She understands the Gotham Underground very well, I think, which is why her work on Catwoman and Punchline works so well for me. But I wasn't sure if they would like jive well together. They're doing very different things. What like Chip is doing right now and what she's doing are completely different worlds. So I wasn't sure how they were going to blend together. But overall, I think this event is really cool. And to give you kind of a high-level summary of what this is about is, if you've been reading Catwoman, you've known that she's been looking for slightly more unconventional approaches to lowering the crime rate of Gotham. She's doing things differently. She's not running around vigilante style, beating people up as they're doing crimes, akin to what the Bat family does. What she's doing is trying, in some ways, doing a more systematic approach and kind of a ground level approach to fighting crime. And funnily enough, this has like a lot of real world implications. It's kind of like incarceration versus like getting to the root of why people are committing crime in the first place. And so Catwoman is going for that path. And I'll continue on this and then I'll get into the characterization critiques because I've heard a bit about those. So basically, she's like, okay, you have a lot of these henchmen who are getting such small cuts of their thing, so they can't afford anything. They have to stay in crime. They go into prison, but then they're let out and they don't have any money. And so they're kind of stuck in this spiral of getting underpaid and exploited by these major kind of crime powers that be in the underground. And so she is trying to give them an out. And basically, she is teaching them to be cat burglars like her, but targeting people in her view that are more deserving of it. So basically the incredibly wealthy is kind of the main thing. So targeting them, they're not home, they'll be okay financially, this person gets to eat, nobody gets hurt, boom, we're good to go. And that's what she's been doing. She's been training people on how to do this, how to scope out places and ensure that nobody is there so nobody gets hurt. And it's actually had measurable benefits to Gotham, which is crazy. So basically, yeah, like there has been demonstrable change in Gotham, mind you, in Batman's absence. Because if you've been reading Batman by Chip Zdarsky, he has been dealing with multiversal, like he's been somewhere else. He's got the Zur-Anar thing going on in his head. He's been sleeping also. So he's got a lot going on, and now that he's kind of back into the fold, he's like, what is going on here? And he basically gets a direct meeting with all of them. The whole Bat family comes there, and Catwoman or Selina meets with them and basically gives them a rundown of what she's doing. And she's basically like, all I'm asking is that you stay out of it. Like the numbers are showing that what I'm doing is working. I just don't want you to butt your head in needlessly. So like, you leave me alone and everybody wins. Basically, that's what she's asking for. And the meeting is very interesting because I think it is an excellent demonstration of the complex dynamics between Bruce and Selina. And Bruce is he's very much an absolutist at times, maybe more so than normal in this run, in the way that he is not having it whatsoever. He is of the mind like, listen, crime is crime. It doesn't matter who you're targeting. And he doesn't seem to be particularly receptive or sympathetic to the idea of like, hey, I'm targeting people of means, so like these guys are not going to starve to death overnight from us robbing them, because he comes from money. And so Bruce is not really into it. He's like, hey, my parents were really wealthy, so that's not something that's going to resonate with him, which I always thought, I think that's an interesting thing to explore, because it's something I've always thought about, which is like how detached Bruce would realistically be from the ground level. And again, not calling him like callous or because I think Bruce cares, you know what I mean, and he wants to help people, but somebody who comes from means and is such an absolutist about law would naturally be butting against people who are in tricky spots, who maybe come from poverty, who don't feel that they have another way out, and that are kind of in some ways forced into crime or forced into go outside the confines of the law to eat, to put food on their table, to take care of their families, whatever. And yeah, there's like a lot of unsavory figures in Gotham, and I'm talking less about them. I'm focusing more on the people who are like accepting unsavory jobs, so you know, the hench people and stuff like that. And so Bruce doesn't really have any sympathies for that. And I know he does donate a ton of money and stuff like that, like narrative wise, so it's not that like all he does is walk around and beat the crap out of people. Like obviously, you know, he dedicates his money, and he tries to make changes where he can. But yeah, no, it's a really interesting thing to see these kind of fundamentally different ideologies, where like Catwoman is very much results oriented, and Batman seems, in this run at least, to be very principles oriented. So she is like, listen, this is the desired outcome that we all want, and I am literally manifesting it. I'm bringing it to you, but you just don't like the way that I'm doing it, basically. And Batman is like this crime is principally wrong, and so we ought to not accept it in any form. And so that's going to put them against each other. Naturally, you could probably predict the one Bat family member that is that agrees with Selina, and you know, that's Jason. So he basically aligns with her and then meets up with her afterwards, and he's in. And I'm conflicted about the choice of Jason. Not that I don't think Jason would make that decision. I just hate how whenever there's a Bat family member that's supposed to be presented as the morally ambiguous or off or wrong in this situation, Bat family member, it's always Jason. When I thought that Selina, whether you agree with her or not, has made a very sound logical argument with undeniable results, and I don't think it should be chalked up to like the only person who in the Bat family would even like rock with her cause is the person who's the bad guy who's willing to kill people, like Red Hood is oftentimes portrayed as. So, you know, I was hoping that like maybe Barb or Steph or even Tim, one of them. I didn't expect Damian necessarily to be amenable to that. He's never been particularly fond of Selina or anything like that, but yeah, I was just hoping one, and again, there's still time. This event is going to be a long, I think like a 9-part series or something like that. So we have lots of time to go. But I was hoping that there was a little bit something of like other characters being more amenable to the argument that she made, because I thought she made a very sound argument. Again, like, and I won't get too much into politics or anything like that, but like in some ways she's advocating for like forced redistribution of wealth. And so I would imagine when you're talking about desired outcomes and people of means and Gotham corruption and all that, like more than just Jason would hear that argument and I think make sense of it. Now, let's get into the issue of characterization. That's the main critique I've heard of this book so far, is that like they're not acting the way they normally would. I'm not a characterization hound in terms of like Batman is this, Selina is that. You know, I understand that there is tremendous nuance and tremendous variation from writer to writer in terms of the way characters act, and I know there are like undeniable kind of pillars of what these characters stand for, but then there's a lot of middle ground where you can kind of ebb and flow and wiggle things around to kind of fit whatever narrative needs you have. And I feel like that's what Tinny and Chip are doing. So it's not something that bothered me. Like, when I was reading this book, I was like, Bruce would never do that. Like, he's always seemed a little bit of an absolutist to me. But yeah, like, am I surprised at how fervently he's bucking against something that is obviously working? Like, yeah. Because if I was Bruce, as frustrated as I'd be about her logic, because maybe that doesn't align with my general ideology. Like, I don't want anybody targeted just because they're rich, whatever. That's the type of dude Bruce is. At the same time, she has produced results. I think he needs to take a step back and take a look at things and be like, you know what, like, the way I've been doing things is not working. And the way she's doing things is getting much closer to the desired outcome of all of us than I've ever gotten. Let's keep it real. Let's keep it 100%. Like, Selena, in the shorter time that she's done what she's done, has produced more results than I think Bruce has in a long time. And this is not the first time Bruce has been in this situation. Like, if you look at Nightwing and Bloodhaven, like, yeah, things are much better than Gotham, because so I feel like whenever an opportunity for Bruce to re-examine his approach and maybe pivot presents itself, I think that the writer ought to explore that. So I'm into this book. I actually really like what they're doing. I understand some of the critiques. Some people didn't love the art. I thought it was okay. Yeah, the art's not like my favorite in the world. It's more of a style thing. It's less of a like, oh, I think the art is bad. It's just not what I'm into. Some of the kind of the facial animations looked a little wonky to me, but overall I thought it was a really solid event. I am not mad at it at all. Last DC book, we have The Riddler Year 1. This is issue 6 by Paul Dano and Stevan Subic. So this is the end of the series. I actually did a TikTok just about this, so if you don't follow me on TikTok and you're curious about my high-level thoughts of the whole series, go check that out on my TikTok, Jibreel V2. But overall, I would say I liked this issue a lot. This series, I think, it kind of lulled for me a little bit in the midsection of it. We're talking about issues 3, 4. But by the end here, I was pretty much back into it, as usual, following Edward Nashton. And this basically closes the gap between kind of where we see him in Matt Reeves' Batman and where we kind of left him off at the end of the 5th issue. So, he's kind of gathered his little forces. And if you've seen Matt Reeves' Batman, you know how that goes. But they've done all the ideological and psychological exploration of the character already. So now it was a purely like logistical thing. Like, okay, how does he literally concretely become the Riddler and get in contact with Batman? That's what this is kind of establishing. Who are the first people he kind of targets and stuff like that. So overall, I thought it was a really good issue. I thought it was a really solid series. Now, if you have not read this or you haven't collected it, but you're interested in this series, one thing I could say without a shadow of a doubt is please get the collected edition. Read this in hardcover format. It doesn't read as well as in single issues. Now, if you could buy all 6, again, you're going to read them back to back anyway, so it's similar to a collected edition. But this is totally something that I think it will read so much better, all in one big story, as opposed to kind of reading it month to month like I did. I think it goes better, like it flows better. It's obviously written for trade, kind of a collected edition or something like that. So that's my only critique of it. And it's not a critique of the series, rather than just like the release strategy for me personally. I would have much rather read this as a collected edition. That's the one thing I wish I would have held out on. But other than that, I was really impressed by Paul Dano's writing ability. I think he perfectly translated from the way he kind of delivered the lines and the way he kind of embodied that character, kind of translating that to text, the way this character would write and ramble, and the frustrations and the kind of unhinged nature and the kind of existential questions that Edward has about the way that Gotham is structured and the corruption of it and how it kind of preys and takes advantage of people like him. Very interesting stuff. And kind of seeing Edward as him thinking that he is the person to enforce morality. Like, he's surrounded by immorality, and I'm going to be the one who kind of shines a spotlight on it and works in conjunction maybe with Batman to kind of cleanse Gotham of its sin. I think it's such an interesting way to approach the Riddler. And so, yeah, I'm really into this book. Glad it's done in terms of, like, I had enough, didn't need much more beyond that. But another banger from Black Label for sure. And then lastly, let's get into it. The Devil's Cut. This is from Distillery. If you don't know what Distillery is, this is a new indie publisher that has come out, and it's a collaboration between a ton of incredible talented people from the comic industry, and they're all kind of coming together. And so you'll see a lot of names you recognize and a lot of names you don't. And the cool thing about this kind of debut of the publisher is that this is a compilation book, so you get a whole bunch of short stories, some of them really short. You get that in this beautiful oversized format. It's akin to the prestige format that you see with the Black Label books over there at DC. Most of the, or not most, but some of the DC books have prestige format. Some of them are closer to the Riddler, which are like normal cardstock variant type things. But overall, I loved reading this. A lot of the shorts were actually really, really interesting, and I would love to see what they kind of translate into another series. Because they're so short, you only kind of get like little morsels of the narratives. You don't get really a chance to fully understand, but a lot of them are like one and done, so you can kind of get in, get out. Okay, cute, fun story. A insane Joelle Jones story, or Joelle Jones drawn story in there. Was that written by Stephanie Phillips? I can't remember who wrote it. But yeah, that was like a trippy story. I had heard about that, the whole dead body thing. But the art throughout this book is just incredible. And so I'm saying, if you're at all interested in indie books, if you're into creator-owned books, if you're into creators getting paid the way they're supposed to be paid, and if you're into collector items and you're interested in seeing the birth of a new, what I think is going to be pretty successful and pretty innovative new label, yo, go check this out. I'm very excited to have this. So that is my pull list. And so let's take a quick second to get into what else I read. These are the books that I read digitally, didn't get them physically. Only have a handful here, only 5. Quick coffee break. You know I got to take those coffee breaks, right? So let's get into it. Wolverine number 36. So this is part 3 of the Weapons of Vengeance event. That is a crossover between Ghost Rider. I've talked about it the last 2 weeks. And so basically this is just continuing that narrative. If anything, you know, it's a very kind of like campy, over the top, very 90s type of event. I'm actually really, really enjoying it. Basically what happens in this event, or this issue, is they're continuing to hunt that kid. You get a little bit more insight into what that possessed kid has been doing all this time, and how he's feeding and how he's surviving, and the shady deals that his handler is working out for him. You have Wolverine and Ghost Rider following these threads in this kind of like path of blood and destruction that he's left throughout the country. They're getting closer and closer. And then you have the idea that the kid is actually going to have this demon removed from him, and it's actually transferred into Wolverine. And so at the end you get this kind of like hellspawn demonic Wolverine. It's goofy, but I like it. It's fun. And I like it because it's a little break from all the Krakoa stuff. We also have Ben Percy writing X-Force, and X-Force and Wolverine have had this like insane synergy lately, where they just like overlap at like every opportunity possible. And so to the idea that like X-Force can continue all the Beast War stuff and have Wolverine do its own thing for just a second, I like that. You have Wolverine mainstays like Jeff Bannister make an appearance, and he has a really close call, but he's saved, thankfully, by the character that's been working with Johnny. Sorry, her name escapes me, but it's kind of funny seeing the FBI character and the CIA character, or the ex-FBI and ex-CIA character kind of working together. It's a fun series. Let's go to the next one. We have The Incredible Hulk number 3. Philip Kennedy Johnson written. Continues to be so good. I'm really enjoying this run. I feel like it's going super under the radar. Unfortunately, I feel like the visibility that Hulk was getting during like the Immortal Al Ewing days has kind of waned after what we got afterwards, which I think was like the Donny Cates run, if I'm not mistaken. And so unfortunately, it feels like a lot of people are not really paying attention to Hulk right now. He's not tying into anything bigger. There's no events happening, but I just love the horror theme they're going for. They do a little bit more for the interpersonal relationship between that young girl that is following Bruce or Hulk right now, and you have this like cult of like dead people, and they're kind of just dealing with all that stuff, and the whole thing collapses, and they're just trying to survive. And overall, it was a very quick read, but overall, I like this run quite a bit. I think it's also going to read much better as a trade. You're getting kind of like little sprinkles, little morsels, issue to issue. I think once you get like the first like 5 or 6 issues, and it's combined in a trade, you can get that first arc off, and I think it'll read a lot better. But and I think it reads great already. I think this is a great return to form. This is obviously, I think, the run that probably should have happened after Immortal Hulk, but unfortunately it didn't. And so you have this kind of continued of like Bruce wandering through the U.S. and I'm hoping they keep it in like the folk horror realm because that's why I think is really serving it well right now. Let's get into the second one. Or the third one. We have Blade #2 here. Continues to be so good. I'm just really, really liking what they're doing with this. The art is pretty incredible. This one is a little bit less like actiony than the first one overall, but you have kind of some interpersonal romance stuff for Blade. And I do want to pull up what's his name really quick. Brian Hill, there we go, and Elena Casagrande doing the art. They're just absolutely killing it. And again, this one kind of does spawn off of loosely from the Bloodline Daughter of Blade series that just kind of wrapped up, even though that was a lot more, it wasn't comedic, but it was lighter in tone. This one is a pretty traditional Blade book, but you see him going through it and getting hunted and just dealing with the fallout of that one girl who they're trying to kill. And it's a pretty cool book. It's early on, so I still have a ton of questions. I don't have like full insight into what they're actually trying to do here, but overall, I think it's really great. Go check out Blade #2. Ooh, let's get into another pretty good one. We have Action Comics presents the Doomsday Special #1. And this is interesting because you have Martian Manhunter, of all characters, kind of coming back, and Supergirl kind of joining forces because I guess Martian Manhunter can sense that like Doomsday is trying to come back and kind of sends the message to Supergirl, and through kind of reading that, they're trapped back and yanked back into this like hell-like place, which apparently is like the physical manifestation of the belief that a lot of people have. And you have Doomsday trying to break out there, and so you get this really crazy like Dante's Inferno meets Doomsday from Superman type of issue. It's really crazy stuff, and you would imagine a lot of this is going to have larger implications in Superman or Action Comics when that kind of continues. But yeah, it's really trippy stuff. It has a really cool conversation between Supergirl and Superman talking about what was it like to like face off against Doomsday and lose, and you get like a interesting look at like Clark's psychology of it, where it's like he was kind of just playing the game of like surviving long enough to try to either take him out with him or like keep him from destroying or hurting anybody, because he knows that if he falls, the family's next. And so that was like a trippy thing, you know, just kind of like you can only imagine like how scary that must have been, that like you have Superman, who's this incredibly, immensely powerful being, facing off against this guy who he knows himself that like this guy's gonna kill me. Like that must be a trippy moment, and just trying to do as much damage as you can beforehand before falling when you know your death is essentially inevitable. It's also interesting of a look into Doomsday's relationship with the Kryptonians overall, that to know that he's this kind of like mythological being that people talk about. Yeah, it's trippy stuff, man. This is a really good special, and you should check it out. Even if you're not like a huge Superman fan, I think there's really interesting stuff. Lastly, let's get into World Tree #5. Very good issue, James Tynion and Joy, and I'm liking the direction of this series. So basically, you have this undernet virus thing that's kind of corrupting the world and making the world super violent. And so they kind of have this kill switch that one of the characters hits before they die, and is inevitably hurt by his sister actually. And he kills the internet except for one place, which is going to be the place where they can kind of face off against this. I don't fully know what's on the other side. I don't know if they've answered that question concretely. But yeah, this series continues to be really, really fun. I like it a lot. This is something that I think I'm probably going to return back to. I want to reread it with the full context of just knowing where it's going, because when it first started, I thought it was going in one direction. It's turned out to be a very different type of series. But you have this kind of like flash forward thing of like this post-apocalyptic looking world. It's interesting stuff. I like World Tree. I know I heard a lot of people talking about it when it first started, but I don't know how many people are still reading it. So if you've kind of lapsed on World Tree, I'd say catch up, pick it up on trade if you can. Definitely check this out because I think it's pretty solid. Let's move into pick of the week. Let's keep it moving. So I'm going to go through my issues. Yeah, I'm going to choose this one. We're going with Batman, Catman, the Gotham War, or Batman, Catwoman, the Gotham War. That might be a surprise to some people. I know some people actually didn't like this issue, but I thought it was really fun. And hey, it's my show. I'll do what I want. But overall, yeah, I thought they did a good job. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Chip Zdarsky and Tinny Howard, I think you guys are doing a pretty solid event. I'm excited to see where it goes over the next 9 parts or so. I would imagine that this is going to be the event that the next arcs of the respective series are about. So I'm excited to see where it goes. 9 parts seems like a lot, so hopefully it doesn't overstay its welcome too crazy, but I'm excited to see where it goes. So before we wrap up the show, let's get into some reading recommendations for next week. I have a whole bunch for you guys because we have a huge week, and also we have a number of number 1s coming out specifically from DC. So I'm excited to get talking about that. So first, let's get into Batman 137. This is Chip Zdarsky's run. Continues to be really, really good. Batman is a series that I'm quite enjoying right now. The last arc was cool. I liked the failsafe arc a lot more than the second arc, but I'm liking the direction that they're going in right now. And of the 2 Batman series, this and Detective, I think Detective is probably a little bit better written, but I'll give you full disclosure. I've dropped Detective Comics in the first time in a very long time because I just cannot get through these issues. Like, it is, and I mean this with all the peace and love in the world, it is insanely boring to me what Ram V's doing. It's just I can't get into it. So, you know, one day I might return to it, or like when there's a new creative team on Detective, I'll probably go. But at least for right now, if you're looking for straightforward just like Batman stuff, Chip Zdarsky's doing his thing. Not as good as his like Daredevil stuff or anything like that, but overall I'm digging it. We have Poison Ivy, number 14. Finally, this series is back. I think this is written by G. Willow Wilson, if I'm not mistaken. This has been dormant, like a lot of series from DC, for 2 months now because of Night Terror. So I'm glad to finally get back to that. I know she's since kind of returned back to Harley, so I don't know if she's going to stick around for Gotham now or she's going to hit the road again. We'll see. We have Shazam number 3. This is Mark Waid written. I like this series a lot. This is another fun kind of classic Dawn of DC type book, similar to what they're doing with Green Arrow. I'm having a blast with it. I love Mark Waid's writing, so this one I'm definitely going to continue reading. We have Birds of Prey number 1. So this is the first of 3 number 1s that are coming out next week from DC. So Birds of Prey number 1, I love this lineup. I have an Art Germ Big Barda variant that I'm so stoked for. I can't wait. It's so beautiful. So definitely excited for that. Birds of Prey number 1 is going to be good. We have Blue Beetle number 1. That is good timing on that, you know, kind of fresh off the movie and stuff like that. I'm excited to see what this creative team does. So far, pretty much every Dawn of DC book has been really good. Some I'm into less than others, like Steelworks I can't really get into that much, but all the rest have been like really, really solid. So I have a lot of faith in this one. The last arc of Blue Beetle that ended not too long ago, like Graduation Day or something like that, I thought was pretty fun too. So I'm excited for this one. Next one I'm very excited for, Fire and Ice, Welcome to Smallville number 1. I have a David Nakayama variant that is going to be coming. I'm stoked for. I love Fire and Ice, and I think my love for these 2 characters have kind of reinvigorated recently with the Human Target stuff. So I'm excited for them to get their own dedicated series, and I'm curious to see if it's like handled like a buddy cop or like a comedy thing, or is this like a more serious run? But I feel like these are super underutilized characters, so I'm super down for them to get their own dedicated run. This is another one of my favorite Black Label books at the moment, or my favorite DC books period. We have Peacemaker's Tries Hard. If you like the Peacemaker show, if you like James Gunn and you're looking for Peacemaker comics that feel like that, go check out this series. Like that, I think it fits perfectly. It feels like a season 2, if anything. So shout out to Peacemaker Tries Hard. So good. Let's get into some Marvel stuff. ASM 33. You know, I'm a Spider-Man fan. I like what they're doing. We're leading up into the Gang War stuff. We have the Kraven and Queen Goblin stuff. And so I think it's worth kind of checking out this run and seeing what Zeb Wells is doing right now. If you got super turned off of the previous stuff, specifically with all the Peter and Paul and Mary Jane and Kamala dying, if you didn't like any of that stuff and you're looking for Spider-Man that's a little bit maybe more like taking chances, so it's not like super paint by numbers, but at the same time not that, check this out, because I think they're doing some cool stuff in terms of Peter getting injected with the Goblin virus or the sins of Peter, the sins of Norman. Actually, it's not a virus, but I think it's pretty interesting. We have Moon Knight number 27 continuing to be one of the best runs coming out of Marvel right now. Shout out to Jed MacKay. I worry about how long this run is gonna be, because I know Jed McKay is getting pulled into Avengers, and he's doing Doctor Strange, and he's doing a bunch of stuff. And so I worry about Moon Knight's the one who's been going the longest, and I feel like if one's gonna get cut, it might be this one. So hopefully he holds on for a little bit longer, but this run continues to be excellent. We have X-Men number 26. I love X-Men right now. We're dealing with the Fall of X stuff, so I'm excited to see what goes next. If you look at the cover, you have Cyclops getting tortured. You know he got captured by Orcus, so I'm stoked to see where that goes. We have Immortal X-Men number 15 with this haunting cover with Wolverine on it. I'm super down to see what happens here. I'm assuming this is going to continue some of the storylines with like Exodus and Hope and all the mutants and Destiny kind of wandering around this nowhere, no when type desert thing. Very interesting. And then I would also imagine we're going to get some more Sebastian Shaw and Celine and all of that happening actually on Krakoa, now that they were not on Krakoa, because Charlie I think is the only one that's on Krakoa right now, but the ownership, all of those logistical stuff. So you have a number of different threads that they're pulling from, but lots of great storytelling happening there over in Immortal X-Men. I trust Kieran Gillen, so I'm super down to, I'm glad he's still even going, to be honest with you. We have Fantastic Four number 11. This is Ryan North's run. This was a run that I liked a lot when I first started. Then I kind of started losing interest in a little bit because I didn't feel like he was doing too much. But then last issue was so good. And so I was like, you know what? I'm really impressed with what Fantastic Four is doing right now. So I'm super down to see where it goes from here. The only, I guess, it's not a critique. It's just, it's very episodic, this run. Like, there's not these bigger, like, over-the-top branching storylines. But you get some good, like, we've gotten some good Doctor Doom stuff and some really good time displacement stuff. Like, I love Ryan North's appreciation for the sci-fi portion of Fantastic Four. So this is not your run-of-the-mill superhero mag. Like this, they're doubling down into the sci-fi component. So it's very old school in that way. And yeah, I like what Ryan North is doing. Next, we have Scarlet Witch number 8, Steve Orlando written. I continue to enjoy this book. I'm excited to see Loki kind of go into that world. Another very episodic series. What I love about it is, what I love about Scarlet Witch is actually what some people seem to really not like, because it's not this over-the-top Wanda, no more mutants, crazy power stuff. It's a lot more low-key. She's running her tea shop. You got Darcy helping her and stuff like that. I like that, you know, random people are coming to her and she's just using her powers to help people. And Loki has his own series right now. You have Immortal Thor going on right now, so lots of Loki action. I'm excited to see him kind of going into that world. Obviously, Wanda's been dealing with the ramification of her father's clone kind of coming back, so there's some good stuff happening over there in that world. Let's see, we got Doctor Strange number 7. Last issue, also incredible issue. Really had a great time with that. That was playing around with the idea of this like General Strange that from like thousands of years of war that he was pulled into by the Vishanti, and that was kind of sealed away. And I think that's the next storyline that him and Clea are gonna have to deal with. So yeah, Doctor Strange, fire. Silk number 5. I think this is the last issue of this respective volume of Silk, and I'm having a really good time with it. It's very unconventional. It's not street level stuff at all, and I've liked that they've taken Silk away from all that kind of traditional Spider stuff, because we've done it. If anything, I'd say maybe they could do a little bit more Spider Totem stuff, because, you know, she has that role of, I think she's the bride still or something like that, but she is the center part of like the Web of Destiny, and so I would like to see more action there. But overall, I thought this was a fun volume, so you might want to check out Silk number 5. We have Ghost Rider Wolverine Weapons of Vengeance Omega number 1. So this is the end of that respective event. That was a 4-part event. I love that it was like here and done. So if you've been reading this event, you want to check out the Omega issue for sure. And then lastly, let's get into Black Panther number 4, Evel Ewing written. Definitely support this series. I love what they're doing. They're really taking the time to explore Wakanda. I love that they're dealing with the interpolitics, and they've kind of in some ways reconfigured, but at the same time continued this kind of on the outs T'Challa thing, but at the same time it's not centered around the prime minister and the royal family of Wakanda and all that stuff like that. It's more ground level street stuff, and him kind of working in conjunction with this other vigilante. You have this wedding going on, and I guess he's facing off against Deathlocks, which is crazy, so as you can see from the covers. So you have all these like Deathlock soldiers, and they're gonna fight, and so they're doing some interesting stuff. Shout out to Eval Ewing. I liked their work on Photon. They did a run on not too long ago. So yeah, those are my reading recommendations for next week. We have lots of great books, and I'm super excited for the show. And there might be some stories soon. I'm hoping to see Blue Beetle by then, but maybe not. I might have to wait till it goes out on streaming or something like that. So apologies to anybody who's waiting to hear my thoughts on Blue Beetle. I promise you guys I'm trying to see it at some point, but I haven't gotten around to it. But if anything, I'll just wait for streaming, and then the moment it's on streaming, I'll let you guys know. So that was Jibreel Talks Comics. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I love doing it. We have some great movement happening over there on TikTok right now that I'm so happy about. I've gotten a number of shout out from a number of creators, all of which I think will appear on JTC Conversations at some point. So I'm very excited about it. Most of the conversations that I have upcoming are coming in October, but I have 1 or 2 planned for September. So I hope you guys keep an eye out for that. I think I'm hoping to get Yoo-Hoo back. Yoo-Hoo Comic Review. We did a conversation that was excellent last time, so I'm looking forward to getting him on the show. And then we have a number of other people that I'm going to keep for secret now between me and them. And then once the episodes are a little bit closer, I'll give you guys a heads up. So that was Jibreel Talks Comics. I'll see you guys next week with a brand new poll list. It's going to be... You see, I was going to say it's going to be a little smaller, but actually I have like 1 or 2 more weeks before all my unsubscriptions take effect because I had a lot of orders. So we have like 2 more weeks before my poll list dramatically shrinks, but then I'll start picking up more collected editions. So don't worry, guys. I have lots to discuss with you guys. But till next time, this is Jibreel. This is my show, Jibreel Talks Comics, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.